Welcome to Why Cities Inside the Mind of an Investor series. Why Cities cultivates an intergenerational innovation ecosystem for middle schoolers and beyond, supporting a diverse pipeline of tomorrow's founders and investors. Investors are a vital part of the startup community, and while there are plenty of resources about how to pitch or how the process works, it can still seem like a black box as to why an investor chooses to invest or not only to the founders, but also to peer investors. So we decided that we wanted to have many conversations with many different investors and to focus on one investor at a time. Every interview is anchored by the same 5 questions, but each conversation is shaped through the follow-up questions influenced from the different lenses of our panel of hosts. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest investor, Barbara. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Barbara. You know, let's kick it off by just hearing a little bit about your story, how did you become an investor? If you want to share kind of that journey to becoming the prolific investor that you are, and also maybe a little bit about your thesis, how you landed on that thesis, if you have one. Yeah, we'd appreciate kind of getting a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, so I'm an economist by education. I love thinking about the world in terms of economics. And I was in management consulting for the first part of my career. And my specialty there was valuing intellectual property. So a lot of that, there's a lot of through lines between what I did years ago in my education and what I'm doing now. I also ran a bunch of nonprofits for a few years. So I was really interested in social impact. This is really before there was, a lot of companies that were really thinking about social impact. I mean, there were rare companies like a Ben and Jerry's or something like that had like a mission. But but I've been investing in this particular way, like private equity, early stage companies for about 10 years. My investment thesis won't be surprising, since I said I was, I'm an economist, I'm a data person, but I ground my analysis in data. And I think it's really important to have data as a complement to what interests you, because there's so many super interesting companies, and you can really get caught up in oh, I totally get that problem you're trying to solve. Oh, I am your exact customer. I might really like founders, they're really great. But, I have to really ground things into the data. And so, no surprises, I like data. So I'm really into Moneyball. I'm a big baseball fan. So, there are probably 5 to 10 data characteristics for companies that I look for. For example, I won't give all 10 because that's boring. But
we have time.
But the most important thing is if you say you're data driven, then you have to invest in companies that have women on the founding team, because the data is so solid that gender diverse teams outperform monogender teams. And and then when you layer in diversity, all kinds of diversity, not just racial diversity or gender diversity, but actually experiential diversity, educational diversity, then you're really creating a winning team, which leads to teams. I want to invest in teams. I will invest. I have many times been the first check into a company, but I've been doing it for 10 years. So I sometimes will invest in that, but that takes a lot of time. And if that first money is into a solo entrepreneur, I know that they have significant risk of failing if they're a solopreneur versus a team. So in most cases, my investment is predicated on they got to build their team. So those are a couple of things. I'm geographically agnostic. I invest across the US, those kinds of things.
So a lot of this is pretty sophisticated. And so I was wondering, in the 10 years of investment that you've done, did you come to all of this right away? And this was because you are data driven, very analytical, did you actually think these things through before you started investing, or did you kind of, you know, go in not sure what was your sweet spot and whether or not you would write the first check, or did you know that diverse teams, I mean, we all know it theoretically, you know, speaking,
Yeah, no,
but
I would
how
definitely
did
say
you,
that
did this kind
the
of form along the way?
yeah, I mean, the gender thing from the get-go, I just believe in supporting more women
Yep.
running businesses.
Right, so from the get-go, that was one of your
That
main
was true.
things. Okay. Yep.
I think I learned early on about the pitfalls of investing in, well, I learned from my personal experience, the pitfalls of investing in a solo entrepreneur and also being first check in some cases, and how to be smart about it. But it was really first round capital when they wrote their reports. I mean, they do them all the time, but like there was one a few years ago, which really like hammered those numbers home, that solopreneurs aren't as successful and that women are more successful, et cetera, et cetera. So it sort of has evolved.
Yeah. I want to like with respect to your analysis of startups, and you mentioned, you know, you're centered on data. If you don't mind, what are some of the, if you will, KPIs that you're looking at? What are some of the, you know, I can think of things like, you know, is it like a return on invested capital? What is the things that you're centering on to kind of distill whether or not something's going to be, you know, a good investment for you?
Well, I mean, that really, obviously, that depends. I mean, when you're investing super early, like stage or something like that, all the numbers are all made up anyways, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I don't want to hang my hat too much on some data, but you know, customer acquisition costs is a huge thing that we all think about. And you know, customer life cycle,
Mhm.
diverse revenue streams, like some of those things sort of all play together. Those would be ones that like are sort of top of mind.
Yeah.
So how do
You know,
you, at that early stage, how do you differentiate, like, what are some of the key things that you look at this, you know, first check-in, if it's a, you know, I guess there's a question of, even though sometimes good businesses are not necessarily good investments, and then the whole, so we
oh,
interviewed somebody who had like this soundbite that I love, and he mentioned, you know, not every feature is a product, not every product is a company, and not every company is an investment.
Love it.
yeah,
Where do you fall on kind of that at that early stage? Or you also mentioned sometimes you'll be the first check and you're not always. So where's your views within that?
well, first check in would have to be a company I was really, really passionate about. And something I also felt like I could personally have a big impact on de-risking the investment, making connections, things like that. So, because that takes a lot of work. So it's not so much that it's not a risk decision. Like, oh, I don't want to write first checks because it's risky. I mean, it is risky,
Right.
but the work you have to do when you're super early investing, as opposed to coming in at the end of the seed round, coming in at an A, like a lot of stuff has been done.
So
And
when you say
chances are
stuff,
I
do
don't
you
have to.
mean like the due diligence piece of it, or how much you have to
No,
roll
how
up
much the
sleeves and
company
help the
actually, the
founder?
work the company has to do. Like,
Okay.
you know, by the end of the seed round, they probably have, you know, customers and they have a bigger team and so forth. Like, you know, first check can really mean like it's a solopreneur, two people, they have a prototype or something, or they're doing something, but they have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And so you're opening the door a lot of times for more investors, but also for just all the other things they need to do with their business.
It sounds like a lot of the data that drives your decisions comes mostly from either like revenue, but you talked a little bit about teams. So kind of going along that, when you receive a pitch deck, I'm assuming people just send you their pitch deck, or that would also be another question, is how do you find these entrepreneurs to invest in? But once you get the pitch deck, what are the things that make you go like, aha, like I'm going to actually take a second to like either go into a meeting with the team or actually like read all the material? I know, because That's
I
sort of
jump
where we're-
around a lot in a pitch deck for sure. Like, first of all, I'm like, do I care at all about this thing that they're doing? Like, I'm a little impatient about all of the problems we have in our world. Like, we have a huge climate crisis. We have huge issues in health disparities, income inequality. So I am not the kind of investor you want to target if you have just a pure like consumer play or something like that. But having said that, so I first would look at that, and then like, do I care at all? And then I always jump to the team. Like, I always want to see like, and in particular, like we think about consumer is a good example where a lot of people approach starting a consumer products company as a consumer. Like, they want to make something that they would buy. But consumer products are just a bear. If you don't have a lot of experience really like getting a consumer product to the customer through all the, manufacturing, distribution, I mean, that stuff is a bear. And I've seen so many companies just think they can learn that on the job, and you totally can't do that. So you have to have a team that knows
that's
that.
hardware as well.
Hardware, absolutely. I don't want somebody who's like never been in, like never worked for, depending on what you're making, like they've never worked at a such and such company, like they don't know quality control, they don't know like that. Like, no, I need a really good team. So I'm going to start with that.
Yeah, from an early check perspective, it feels like you might have an unfair advantage as well. I mean, if you started to, early, in the early parts of your career, valuing intellectual property, I'd love to hear about how that comes to play when, you're engaged early and can look at some tech and go, you know what, there's something here. And yeah, you may put in, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 grand more and know like what this tech is worth 100, 200, how do you leverage that in your evaluation, that kind of past experience and skill?
Well, it's funny. First of all, as somebody who used to value intellectual property, the way we come up with valuations for these early stage companies is an insult to the profession. So, it's kind of like, I always compare it to real estate. Like, you have a house and you can put all the fancy widgets in it you want, but if the neighborhood sells for 500, that's what the price is going to be. So anyways, that's a side. But IP, the issue, one of the things I had a great appreciation for when you really study companies with intellectual property is how oftentimes it isn't, like, it's not the IP you think that is generating value. That, for example, it may not be that they have the patent on this particular technology. It's the fact that they have the exclusive contract with company XYZ. That's driving the value. So I look at it more holistically.
Yeah.
I also really think a lot as an economist about like barriers to entry, because I believe ideas are free. Somebody like this whole thing about like, oh, I don't want to tell anybody because I don't want people to steal my idea. I'm like, well, if they can steal your idea, they can steal your idea today, tomorrow, whenever. I don't believe in first mover advantage either. We've all seen that, if you live long enough, you see, oh yeah, I remember they were the first ones to do that. And they're like, that company's dead and gone.
First to fly, first to fall.
Exactly. Yeah.
Although, are you opposed to someone being first and then trying to invest, for like basically a land grab?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But, just understanding that that's what you're up against. Like, if you don't do the land grab, it's not just, we all in the Boston area, I know some of the folks on this call are too young, but we all remember like Digital Equipment Corporation, and their whole thing was like, we're so great, everybody's going to buy our product. And it was like, yeah, no, like if you're not really active in the market, I'm not going to buy your product. But Vicki, you'd asked something about like companies that are great businesses, but not good investments. I see that all the time. And I think one of the issues that we have is that there's a narrative out there that how you build a business, you come up with a great idea and then people give you money and then you're off to the races. And first of all, it's really, really hard to raise money. And then there are just so many ideas. Like I've had many conversations with folks and I'm like, wow, that is a great idea. You're going to make a ton of money at it. No venture capital is going to ever come your way. Like,
What
and
are
I
some
don't just mean,
examples do you think you have off the
like,
top of your head of that?
well, there's a lot of companies that are really service companies, but they're trying to pitch themselves as a tech company because they have some technology that they've developed that helps them do their work better, which is great. And then they're like, oh, but now I can turn around and sell this. And so usually what happens is it's something like, oh, and they would need to be selling this to a market that is like fragmented, decentralized, full of medium-sized businesses, and that's just the road to disaster. As opposed to use this tool and get all the customers you want, like get all the companies because you are doing a great job and this thing makes a ton of money. So I see that actually all the time.
So basically you're alluding to the fact that like it may not be positioned for a proper exit, right? So as an investor, you are looking for that. Or what I've been surprised at over these interviews is that every angel investor seems to have slightly different emphasis on a company's exit potential. What's your?
I'm obviously much more excited about companies that really know what their exit potential is. Because like if they know their path, and that's actually something that I think that some founders maybe from underrepresented groups or folks who aren't as networked, they think an exit is something that like, oh, here's what they put it on their pitch deck, but they don't actually work on it. And I don't think they understand that like companies don't get bought, they get sold. So you have to work at your exit like all the time. I've actually had some pretty decent exits that happened because the company was getting to like an A or a B round. So they raised some money and they were like, they were having a hard time getting to that next fundraising level. So they exited. But they didn't just do that all at once. They did it all along because you can't just, what we typically see is, oh my gosh, I can't raise my money. Now I'm in crisis. And then maybe the company goes under. You have to be pursuing all the options. So
That's
like,
a lot of the founders that I've been talking to of recent, as I kind of look to prepare them for conversations with TBD in particular, is centered around making sure that there's a shared narrative to the investors on, has there been what has been the exits in this part of your market today? Do you have something exclusive such that you could be an acquisition target? How do you see maybe these folks being able to gain back some liquidity when you have a future raise, and having maybe not per se on the deck, but having this narrative about I've thought about these things such that my business is a great investment and not simply just a great business. That's I think an important thing.
Yeah, because it's only a good investment if I'm going to get my money back. Yeah, like I mean, unless you're going to give me some sweet dividends, which is not typically
not likely in a smaller company.
But you also want to see that folks are thinking about that when they're building their board, which shameless plug, I do have a new book out called Build Your Board, Build Your Business.
Is it on Amazon or like somewhere else?
It is on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and in about a month or so, it'll be an audiobook too.
Oh, wonderful. We'll have all that information in the description.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit of a dummy because I should have done this even further shameless plug and showed you, but it's way over there. Anyways. No, but I think that
pause recording.
But on all of these issues around like, team, like with the team, like building your team, building your company, I think a board is incredibly essential. Because, for example, I give a short example in the book about how this woman I knew was, she knew who she wanted to sell her company to. She knew the company. So who did she have as her board chair? somebody who had sold his company to that same company. It's like,
makes sense.
make it so. And so same thing with like when you're building out a team, like, you know, complement your skills and you're thinking about your team, but have those board members who can really sort of help you vet or, you know, provide that extra expertise. You know, so I mean, I think that that's really important, and especially thinking about exit all the time. Like, how are you building your boards? There is a narrative, again, just like how the narrative is all businesses need to raise outside capital. The other narrative is keep your board really small and think about expanding it when you get to the A. No, you need to have a nice, robust board. I think you should have once you have a real company, like you're really going places, you've got a couple of employees, you should have a 5-person board, move to a 7-person board, because you need people around the table who can advise you on the fundraise, on the next steps, on customers, on all the things. Plus, it also is like the fitness for founders, because if you run a board effectively, you're a much better executive. You know, there are lots of people who they do a terrible job running their board because they feel like, oh, I don't have time for this. Oh, then you're working in your business and not on your business. So anyways.
Love that.
One question that I have, kind of focusing on how founders should, even they have like the exit on their mind and it's on their pitch presentation. And I know you mentioned a little bit, like they should be always thinking about the exit. So kind of what's your advice to like actual ventures, like how they should continue throughout their journeys to be like focused on their exit, and what kind of action items do you have like that usually go along the exit or going towards an exit journey?
I think it's networking and communicating. So, you know, I have a CEO who, I mean, many of them do this, where they have an idea which company they would like to sell to, and they start networking to get the right connections at those places. And they start these long-term relationships with these folks who could be possible exits, or then they think about their board who's had successful exits. And you know, Sean, I think you brought up the point about, you know, what's the exit climate like in the space now. That can move, and you want to know when it's moving. For example, I made an investment in a company that is now called the Lydia, and it's a women's health company. And I was really passionate about it. Thought it was great technology. It was really something I needed to see in the world. It's a medical device that stops postpartum hemorrhaging. And I invested in that, but we were really unclear on the exit. I remember talking to the person I co-invested with, and we were like, you know, I don't think this is going to be a huge exit, but maybe in about 5 years, it'll be like a 2-3x. And I was like, that's fine. Of course, that's fine. Give me my money. And, you know, and that was fine. But turns out we actually had a 7x exit in 2 years.
Oh,
so the market
wow.
changed rapidly.
Right.
You know, Merck ended up deciding it wanted to go deep into women's maternal health, and they created a publicly traded company, Oregon, if I'm saying it right, and they bought it. Wow. And so I knew that the fundamentals were good. I knew that this company was not going to go out of business. It would be able to sell. There was not a lot of transactions in the market, but the market changed.
So what's the balance though? Because we've had some investors who flat out said that if founders kind of start the conversation with the exit, it's actually a turnoff for them, because then they're not, you know, kind of product driven, or I don't remember the exact words that those investors used. I know this is where like investors are very different, right? Yes. So
it is definitely a delicate balance, but I think that if you have, I mean, if you're creating something that is in high demand, and there are a lot of possible suitors, I mean, maybe I think it is delicate that you want to talk about the market opportunity a lot, and then say, and by the way, there's some exits, and maybe what you do is, because you get to try to get the temperature of the person, you can always have, like in your deck when you're pitching, like you could have exits as like a separate thing that you can pull up
Mhm.
if you get into that conversation. So yeah.
So basically be prepared, have it all researched out and have it be part of your strategy. And then
It's essential. Like it's essential to know who are your customers, who's your competitors, and like, and then that exit, because those exit might be in those other two groups.
right. And understanding like how big are those potential wallets for the exit and how often that happens and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that definitely for some investors
And
is
how
one of
they
the
think
questions.
about exits, like do they care about the number of users you have, or do they care about your revenue? Because those can be really different. I know like in ed
Right.
tech, it tends to be a profit-based calculation, but in a lot of other ones, it's really, I say butts and seats, it's users. So yeah.
Got it. You mentioned certainly gender being an important criteria when you're looking at companies. Yes, we've seen a lot of data around the decisioning from organizations that have a diverse founder base. We fortunately have a lot of folks who are watching this who kind of come from diverse backgrounds. When you think about the investment, the market for gaining investment, what are some of the things that those underrepresented founders can do to get more swings on bat, to get more opportunities? What can the industry do to kind of get better at finding these founders who have great investments, but can't get that ball?
So there's a very sad statistic that this was done, I believe, by Astia, which that's a company that an angel group that invests in women-led companies. They have a lot of data on gender, and I believe they did the research that it took a white woman 7 introductions to get an investor, and it took Black women 50 to get an investor, which is a very sobering statistic. I think that one of the issues with underrepresented founders is they are often used as what I call diversity theater, where the investor likes being seen with the entrepreneur, but they don't write a check, or if they write a check, it's very small. And so I think that you need to do due diligence on investors. I believe in all investors. I mean, all founders should be asking like simple questions, like if you are meeting with an investor, ask them, have you ever invested in a woman-led company? Have you ever invested in a company where there's a person of color on the founding team? And if they say, well, my angel group, blah, 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 you're like,
yeah.
Did you? And so I think vetting that, and then just asking them other questions, like, tell me about the most recent investment that you made, and like ask them, all those kinds of questions to really suss out, is this a person who writes checks? And are they going to write a check to you? Because, a lot of these like, investor events are more of a scene. Like people don't actually write checks. They're just there because they want to come for the free drinks or whatever they want to do, but they aren't actually serious investors. And I believe that you should, if you see, so say you're raising your seed, you see someone who maybe even in a similar field or not, but who has raised a seed, or they're a bit ahead of you, ask them for who their investors are and get to know them, because my companies, when they introduce me to someone, even if it's something that I'm not interested in, I will always take the connection. I will always have the conversation. I will always give the feedback. So having another company introduce you is great. And also you need to build that network anyways. Having that connection with your elder, even if they're younger than you or whatever, but like that person who's like just that step ahead of you. And I would also do that on your board too. If you're raising a seed, You should have somebody on your board who's maybe raised a B or a C or like something more substantial.
Yeah.
So you mentioned how like having an intro, right? And that's one of the ways that you always respond. That made me think of like, so how does somebody get your attention? If it's not an intro, like what do they have to have in their email or their, because I know you said you jump around on your pitch deck, but even in the email or LinkedIn or, cold DM somewhere from some social media, what makes you click it? Because I imagine you get bombarded, right? We all get bombarded by it.
But you'd be surprised at how few high quality messages I get. I do prefer LinkedIn because it allows me to quickly click to see like who do we know in common, because it'll also tell me that if we have a lot of folks in common, then they've done a lot of networking work. So you'd be surprised how I get so many boilerplate messages. If it's a boilerplate message, I just archive it, and you can tell what's boilerplate and what's
all right.
legit.
So that's one of the key things, is a non-boilerplate.
Yeah. And I'm happy to respond too. I mean, people reach out to me and they said, I saw you invested in XYZ, da 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 da, and I might reply. I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to them, or maybe I'll be like, no, that what you're doing is just not in my sweet spot.
Yeah, throughout this meeting, I've gathered that data and the actual feasibility of the product is important to you, but also that founder and who they are also important. And there's like a balance between those. But this is like a question that we ask a lot. Does the founder or the actual product or opportunity or market, which one is more important to you? And what are the different traits would you see in terms of balancing and choosing one over the other, for example?
So it's always team. Yeah, always team. If I really like the team, but I think what they're doing is not useful, good, whatever, I'll tell them that. And maybe they'll come back to me. But no, it's always team, because at the end of the day, it's about people. People have to execute on what they're trying to accomplish. So if it's not a great team, nope, it's not interesting.
Okay.
And your definition is a great team. We've done a lot of diversity talk, but and there was a little moment that we touched upon, like experience within, if you're going into some deep tech, or if you're going into a certain area, knowing the background. Does being a first-time founder or being a serial entrepreneur sort of impact that statistic as well? Because there are numbers backing that up.
Sure. I mean, a serial entrepreneur, the data shows that they are more successful. It also shows that as an investor, that will also be priced into their valuation. So you may not get as good of an investment in a serial entrepreneur, but so you have to weigh that, but you think that maybe it's a little de-risked. I do have some entrepreneurs that they've done things that are really, really different. So you think just because you're a serial entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean that you've made it. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into that. Like, and frankly, I won't invest in a team that is universally young, because they just don't have the life experience. Like, the problems that we need to solve are very complicated. So you need to have a mixture of ages and genders and experiences and things like that. There's too much to do to learn everything on the job.
Right. I guess that's where you can have a great board as well, backing you.
Yeah, but it's also just like, there's so many things, like day-to-day things that, I think, I forgot, Aileen Lee from Cowboy Ventures, she's the original one who coined the phrase, the unicorn. I think she studied that like most unicorns, the founders were 34 years old when they started their companies, most successful. So, and I also see a ton of folks over 40, over 50, they're experienced and they know their customer, they know, what they want to do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Inside the Mind of an Investor. Really loved hearing your thoughts, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.